Right now, as you're watching this video on your phone or computer, there are people living on this planet who have never seen electricity. They've never heard of the internet. They don't even use the wheel, and here's the wild part. Some of them might actually kill you if you tried to say hello. These aren't people from the distant past. They're alive today, breathing the same air we are, living on the same planet. Yet they exist in a completely different world. A world where survival depends on skills most of us have completely forgotten. Today, we're going to explore the last primitive tribes that modern science still can't reach, some by choice, others by circumstance, but all of them holding secrets about human survival that we're only beginning to understand. Let's start with perhaps the most mysterious tribe on Earth, the Sentinelese people of North Sentinel Island. In the Indian Ocean, picture this. You're standing on a boat just a few hundred meters from shore. You can see people on the beach, but they're pointing bows and arrows at you. They're shouting in a language no one has ever translated, and they're making it crystal clear that you are not welcome. This small island, about the size of Manhattan, is home to what experts consider the most isolated tribe in the world. And when I say isolated, I mean they have had virtually zero peaceful contact with the outside world ever. The Sentinelese have been living on this island for an estimated 50,000 to 60,000 years. Think about that for a moment. That's longer than humans have been in Europe or the Americas. They've watched the world change around them without participating in any of it. Here's what makes them truly unique. They actively reject any contact with outsiders, not just politely decline. They attack. In 2018, an American missionary named John Show tried to make contact with them. He was killed almost immediately. This wasn't unusual. The Sentinelese have been consistently hostile to outsiders for decades. But here's the thing that might surprise you. They're not just randomly violent, they're protecting something. Their way of life has survived tsunamis, storms, and countless attempts at contact because they've developed an incredibly sophisticated understanding of their environment. Let me paint you a picture of their daily life. The Sentinelese are master hunters and gatherers. They craft bows and arrows with remarkable precision using materials found only on their island. These aren't crude weapons. Anthropologists who have observed them from a distance describe arrows that are perfectly balanced and incredibly accurate. They build boats that can navigate the dangerous waters around their island. These boats are carved from single trees and designed to handle the rough seas and coral reefs that surround North Sentinel Island. They've never seen a modern boat design, yet they've created vessels that are perfectly adapted to their environment. Their fishing techniques are extraordinary. They use spears, nets, and traps that they've perfected over thousands of years. They know exactly where to find different types of fish when they migrate and how to catch them efficiently. They've turned their entire coastline into a sustainable fishing ground. But perhaps most impressive is their medicinal knowledge. They have no access to modern medicine, yet they've survived for millennia. They must have developed treatments for injuries, infections, and illnesses using only plants and natural materials found on their island. We can only imagine what they know about the healing properties of their local flora. What's fascinating is that they seem to have developed a sustainable population control system. The island supports between 50 to 400 people, and that number has remained relatively stable for centuries. They've figured out how to live in perfect balance with their environment. No overpopulation, no resource depletion. The Indian government has actually made it illegal to approach the island, not just because the Sentinelese are hostile, but because contact with the outside world could literally wipe them out. They have no immunity. Two common diseases like the flu or measles. A single sick visitor could kill the entire tribe within weeks. Now you might be wondering, how do we know anything about them if no one can make contact? Well, researchers have observed them from helicopters and boats at a safe distance. What they've seen is remarkable. The Sentinelese have developed complex social structures, sophisticated tool-making skills, and survival strategies that have kept them alive for thousands of years. So we're left with this incredible mystery. Here is a group of people who have preserved knowledge and skills that date back tens of thousands of years. They understand their island better than any scientist ever could. Yet we can't learn from them because the very act of trying to communicate might destroy them. Now imagine if I told you that there are people living in houses 130 feet up in the air. You'd probably think I was talking about some futuristic city. But deep in the jungles of Papua New Guinea, This is just everyday life for the Korowai people. These aren't just houses built in trees. The Korowai construct their homes 40 meters up in the air. That's about 13 stories high. Imagine waking up every morning and looking down at the forest floor from the height of a skyscraper. Imagine raising your children in a house that sways with the wind. Why do they live so high up? Protection. The forest floor is filled with dangers that would terrify most of us. Wild animals, rival tribes, and what they call lalio or evil spirits. By building their homes in the canopy, they've created a three-dimensional village that's almost impossible to attack. Let me walk you through how they build these incredible structures. First, they select specific trees that can support the weight of an entire family. This isn't random. They have detailed knowledge of which tree species are strong enough, which ones grow straight, and which ones won't attract termites or other destructive insects. The construction process is absolutely remarkable. They use no nails, no modern tools, no heavy machinery, just incredibly sophisticated knowledge of wood joints and plant fibers. They lash everything together using vines and plant rope that they've treated to make it incredibly strong and weather-resistant. These houses aren't temporary shelters. They can last for years and comfortably house 10 to 12 people. They have multiple rooms, sleeping areas, storage spaces, and even separate areas for cooking. They've essentially created apartment buildings in the trees. But here's where things get controversial, and I want to address this directly because it's important to understand their culture completely. The Korowai have historically practiced cannibalism. Now, before you react with horror, let me explain the context. This wasn't about food, it was about their justice system. The Korowai believe that certain crimes, particularly witchcraft, can only be punished by consuming the offender. In their worldview, this isn't barbaric. It's a way of protecting their community from spiritual threats. This practice is largely historical now, but it shows how different their moral framework is from ours. What seems horrifying to us was, in their culture, a form of justice designed to protect the community. Their language is fascinating and tells us a lot about their worldview. They have no words for hello or goodbye because they rarely encounter strangers. Think about that. Their entire social structure assumes that everyone you meet is someone you already know. They have over 20 different words for different types of rain, but no concept of counting beyond 5. Their language is perfectly adapted to their environment. They can describe subtle differences in weather patterns that would be invisible to us, but they don't need to count large numbers because their society doesn't require it. The Korowai are master botanists, though they'd never use that term. They know which plants can cure headaches, which ones can poison arrows, and which ones can be eaten safely. They can identify edible insects and know exactly when fruits will ripen. This knowledge represents thousands of years of careful observation and experimentation. Their understanding of the forest ecosystem is extraordinary. They know which trees flower when, which animals eat what, and how different species interact with each other. They've turned the entire forest into their garden, their pharmacy, and their hardware store, but contact with the modern world is slowly changing them. Some younger Korowai are moving to ground-level villages and adopting modern clothing. They're learning Indonesian and attending schools. The traditional tree-dwelling lifestyle is being abandoned in many areas. What's remarkable is their relationship with their environment. They don't just live in the forest. They think like the forest. They understand the ecosystem as a living entity where every element is connected. This perspective has allowed them to survive in one of the world's most challenging environments for thousands of years. When researchers first made contact with some Korowai groups in the 1970s, many had never seen metal before. Can you imagine that? In a world where we're surrounded by technology, these people had created an entire civilization using only organic materials. The Amazon rainforest is like a parallel universe. It's home to more isolated tribes than anywhere else on Earth. Brazil alone has over 100 uncontacted tribes, and Peru has dozens more. These people have mastered something that sounds impossible in our connected world. They've become invisible. Let me show you how sophisticated. Their hiding techniques are satellite images occasionally capture their settlements. You'll see these perfectly round clearings in the forest with traditional huts and gardens. But here's the incredible part. By the time researchers could reach these locations, the tribes have often moved on. They're not just hiding. They're actively avoiding contact. How do they know we're coming? They've developed early warning systems that would impress any military strategist. They can hear helicopters and small planes long before we can see them. They've learned to recognize the sound of chainsaws and bulldozers from miles away. They can tell the difference between natural forest sounds and human-made noises. These tribes have developed incredible survival strategies that have evolved specifically to avoid contact with the outside world. They rotate their crops in patterns that mimic natural forest growth, making their gardens nearly invisible from above. From a satellite, their agricultural areas look like natural clearings. They build temporary shelters that can be abandoned quickly if outsiders approach. These aren't permanent villages like we're used to. They're designed to be dismantled and moved within hours. Entire communities can disappear into the jungle, leaving almost no trace they were ever there. Their mobility is extraordinary. They've created trail systems that allow them to move through the forest without leaving obvious paths. They know exactly where to find water, food, and shelter throughout their territory. They've essentially turned the entire Amazon into their backyard. But let me tell you about their real superpower. These tribes are master pharmacists. They use over 3,000 different plants for medicine. Think about that number. Your local pharmacy probably stocks fewer medications than these tribes can make from forest plants. Many of our modern drugs were originally discovered by learning from indigenous knowledge. Aspirin comes from willow bark. Quinine, which treats malaria, comes from cinchona bark. Curare, now used in surgery as a muscle relaxant, was originally used by Amazon tribes on their arrows. These isolated tribes likely hold the keys to treating diseases we haven't even discovered yet. They understand plant chemistry in ways that would take our scientists decades to figure out. They know which plants work together, which ones cancel each other out, and how to prepare them for maximum effectiveness. Their hunting techniques are absolutely extraordinary. They use blowguns with poison darts that can kill a monkey at 50 meters. But here's the sophisticated part. The poison they use is designed to kill the animal instantly without contaminating the meat. They've essentially created a hunting system that's both efficient and safe. They've trained their children to move silently through the jungle, reading animal tracks like a book. They can tell you what animal passed by, when it passed, whether it was healthy or sick, and where it was going. They know which fruits are ripe by sound, which rivers have fish by the color of the water. But these tribes face unprecedented threats that their traditional survival strategies can't address. Illegal loggers are destroying their forest home using chainsaws and heavy equipment. Gold miners are polluting their rivers with mercury, poisoning the fish they depend on. Cattle ranchers are burning their land for pasture, destroying thousands of acres in a single fire. Climate change is altering rainfall patterns that their survival depends on. Plants they've relied on for generations are blooming at different times or not at all. Animals are changing their migration patterns. The forest itself is changing faster than they can adapt. The ethical debate surrounding these tribes is incredibly intense. Some argue we should leave them completely alone, respecting their choice to remain isolated. Others believe we have a responsibility to protect them from external threats, which requires some level of contact. Brazil's National Indigenous Peoples Foundation has developed a unique approach. They monitor these tribes from a distance, using satellite imagery and occasional flyovers to ensure they're not being threatened. They create protected zones around known tribal territories and work to keep outsiders out. They intervene only when there's immediate danger, like illegal invasion of their territory or disease outbreaks. It's a delicate balance between protection and respect for tribal autonomy. What's fascinating is how these tribes have adapted to modern threats while maintaining traditional lifestyles. Some have learned to hide from helicopters and airplanes. Others have developed early warning systems to detect approaching outsiders. They're evolving their survival strategies in real time, the knowledge these tribes possess about rainforest ecology is irreplaceable. They understand how to live sustainably in an environment that produces 20% of the world's oxygen. They know which plants and animals are indicators of ecosystem health. As climate change accelerates, their knowledge might be crucial for the survival of the entire planet. Now let's talk about a tribe that has adapted to life in a completely different environment. Imagine spending your entire life on the water, not just vacationing at the beach, but actually living on boats for 8 to 9 months of the year. The Moken people, also known as sea gypsies, have done exactly that for over 1,000 years. The Moken live in the waters around Southeast Asia, particularly around Thailand and Myanmar. These aren't modern vessels with GPS and radar. They live on traditional boats called kabang that they build themselves using techniques passed down for generations. These boats are their homes, their transportation, and their livelihood all in one. Let me describe what it's like to live on a kabang. The entire boat is maybe 30 feet long and 8 feet wide. A family of 6 to 8 people lives, sleeps, cooks, and works in this space. They've developed an incredibly efficient use of space that would make any architect jealous. But here's what makes the Moken truly extraordinary. They've developed physical adaptations that seem almost superhuman. Moken children can see clearly underwater without goggles. Let me repeat that. They can see underwater as clearly as you can see in air. How is this possible? Their eyes have adapted to constrict their pupils and change the shape of their lenses to focus underwater. This is something most humans cannot do. Scientists have studied this ability and found that Moken children can see twice as clearly underwater as European children. They can dive to depths of 20 meters and hold their breath for several minutes. They collect sea cucumbers, shellfish, and other marine life from the ocean floor using nothing but their hands and simple tools. They've turned the entire ocean into their supermarket. Their understanding of ocean patterns is remarkable. They can predict weather changes by reading subtle signs in water color, wave patterns, and animal behavior. They know when storms are coming hours before weather satellites detect them. This knowledge saved their lives during the 2004 tsunami. While hundreds of thousands of people died, the Moken survived because they recognized the warning signs and moved to higher ground. They have oral traditions that describe similar events from the past, and they knew exactly what to do. The Moken have no concept of land ownership. Think about how radical that is in our world of property. Rights and borders. To them, the ocean is their highway, their grocery store, and their pharmacy. They know which coral reefs have the best fish, which underwater caves provide shelter during storms, and which sea plants can treat various ailments. Their social structure is fascinating and perfectly adapted to their lifestyle. Because they live in small boats, they've developed incredibly efficient conflict resolution systems. Arguments must be settled quickly because there's literally nowhere to go. You can't storm off to your room when your room is a boat in the middle of the ocean. They've learned to share resources and make decisions collectively because individual survival depends on group cooperation. If one family's boat is damaged, the entire group helps repair it. If someone gets sick, everyone contributes to their care. The Moken navigate using ancient techniques that would amaze any modern sailor. They read star patterns, ocean currents, and bird flight paths to travel hundreds of miles without any modern instruments. They have mental maps of the entire Andaman Sea, including underwater topography and seasonal changes. They know where to find fresh water on uninhabited islands, where to find shelter during storms, and how to predict wind patterns days in advance. This knowledge represents thousands of years of accumulated wisdom about living in harmony with the ocean. Their boat-building techniques are extraordinary. They select specific types of wood that can withstand salt water and tropical heat. They join the planks using traditional techniques that make the boats both flexible and watertight. These boats can last for decades with proper maintenance, but modern life is encroaching on their traditional lifestyle in ways that threaten their entire culture. Governments want them to settle on land, attend school, and become citizens. They're being forced to carry identity documents and pay taxes. Many Moken children are being sent to land-based schools where they lose their traditional marine skills. Tourism is disrupting their traditional fishing grounds. Speedboats and jet skis are scaring away the fish. Tourists want to see the exotic sea gypsies but don't understand that their presence is destroying the very lifestyle they have come to observe. Pollution and overfishing are damaging the marine ecosystems they depend on. Plastic waste is choking the coral reefs where they collect food. Commercial fishing boats are depleting the fish stocks that the Moken have managed sustainably for generations. Some Moken are adapting by becoming tour guides or selling their traditional crafts to tourists. Others are trying to maintain their nomadic lifestyle while dealing with increasing restrictions on their movement. It's a delicate balance between preservation and adaptation. The Moken's understanding of marine ecosystems is invaluable. They know which fish are indicators of reef health, how to harvest marine resources without depleting them, and how to predict changes in ocean conditions. As our oceans face unprecedented threats from climate change and pollution, their knowledge could be crucial for marine conservation. On the island of Tanna in Vanuatu lives a tribe that has created one of the most unique and fascinating belief systems in the world. The Yakal people practice what they call custom culture, a traditional way of life that incorporates both ancient practices and more recent spiritual beliefs that will absolutely blow your mind. Let me paint you a picture of their daily life. The Yakal live in traditional grass huts that they build using techniques passed down for generations. These aren't primitive shelters. They are sophisticated structures designed to withstand the tropical storms and volcanic activity that are common on their island. They wear clothing made from plant fibers that they harvest and process themselves. The men wear traditional penis sheaths called nambus made from banana leaves. The women wear grass skirts. They refuse to wear modern clothing because they believe it separates them from their natural environment. Here's something that might surprise you about their economy. They refuse to use money. Instead, they operate on a gift economy where resources are shared based on need and relationship. If you need something, you ask for it. If you have something someone else needs, you give it. It's a system based on trust and reciprocity that has worked for centuries. Their society has no formal government, no police, no courts. Instead, they make decisions through consensus and elder guidance. When conflicts arise, they're resolved through discussion and traditional ceremonies. It's a form of democracy that's both ancient and surprisingly effective. But here's where their story gets really fascinating. The Yakal have developed a belief system around a figure called John From. During World War II, American soldiers brought unprecedented wealth to Vanuatu in the form of supplies, food, and equipment. The Yakal had never seen anything like it. They watched planes drop supplies from the sky. They saw soldiers with radios talking to people they couldn't see. They witnessed the incredible abundance of food and goods that the Americans brought. And they developed a belief system around this experience, expecting John From to return and bring prosperity back to their island. This cargo cult phenomenon shows how indigenous peoples interpret contact with modern civilization. The Yakal built mock airstrips and radio towers, hoping to attract the return of the cargo planes. They march in formation carrying bamboo rifles, mimicking the American soldiers they observed. Now you might think this sounds naive, but it's actually a sophisticated response to an incomprehensible situation. Imagine if aliens landed in your backyard with technology you'd never seen before. How would you make sense of it? The Yakal created a belief system that helped them understand and cope with this overwhelming contact with the modern world. But the Yakal aren't just waiting passively for John From's return. They've maintained sophisticated agricultural systems that produce enough food to support their community. They practice sustainable farming, techniques that have kept their soil fertile for centuries. They rotate crops in patterns that mimic natural forest growth. They use natural fertilizers and pest control methods. They've developed varieties of plants specifically adapted to their volcanic soil and tropical climate. Their gardens are essentially food forests that provide everything they need. Their medical knowledge is extensive and incredibly sophisticated. They use over 200 different plants for treating various ailments. They've developed surgical techniques using sharp stones and plant-based anesthetics. They can treat broken bones, infections, and even perform minor surgeries using only natural materials. Their understanding of human anatomy and physiology is remarkably advanced for a society without formal medical training. They know which plants affect different body systems, how to prepare medicines for maximum effectiveness, and how to treat complex medical conditions. The Yakal have a complex and fascinating relationship with the volcanic activity on their island. They view the volcano as a living entity that must be respected and appeased. Their ceremonies and rituals are designed to maintain harmony with these powerful natural forces. This isn't just superstition. They've developed practical knowledge about volcanic activity that has kept them safe for generations. They know the warning signs of eruptions. They understand which areas are safe during different types of volcanic activity, and they've developed evacuation procedures that have saved countless lives. Their social structure emphasizes collective responsibility in ways that would seem revolutionary in our individualistic society. Children are raised by the entire community, not just their parents. Every adult has a role in educating and protecting every child. Elder care is seen as a sacred duty that the entire community shares. Knowledge is shared freely because individual survival depends on group knowledge. If someone discovers a new medicinal plant or develops a better farming technique, they teach it to everyone. There's no concept of intellectual property or trade secrets. The Yakel face pressure to modernize from the Vanuatu government and outside organizations. They're encouraged to send their children to schools, to adopt modern clothing, and to participate in the cash economy. But they've chosen to maintain their traditional lifestyle while selectively adopting certain modern conveniences. They use some metal tools but reject electricity. They accept some modern medicine but prefer traditional treatments. They interact with the modern world when necessary but return to their traditional villages and practices. They're creating their own path between ancient and modern worlds. What's remarkable is their ability to maintain their cultural identity while adapting to changing circumstances. They've incorporated the John from belief system into their traditional practices. They've learned to deal with tourists and researchers while protecting their sacred knowledge. They've found ways to engage with the modern world without losing their essential identity. Now here's what I find absolutely fascinating. Despite living in completely different environments, separated by thousands of miles and centuries of isolation, these tribes share remarkably similar survival strategies. It's like they've all discovered the same fundamental truths about human survival. Let's start with fire. Every single one of these tribes has mastered fire making, but their methods are incredibly sophisticated. They don't just start fires. They maintain them, transport them, and use them for multiple purposes that would amaze you. The Sentinelese use fire for cooking, obviously, but also for tool making and protection. They can start fires in the rain, keep them burning for days, and use controlled burns to manage their environment. The Korowai use fire for clearing land, hardening wood tools, and even for communication over long distances. The Moken have developed techniques for making fire on boats, which is incredibly challenging when you're surrounded by water and salt air. They use special tinder that stays dry and techniques for maintaining fires in windy conditions. Hunting and fishing techniques show incredible innovation across all these tribes. They've developed weapons and strategies specifically adapted to their environments, and the level of sophistication is remarkable. The Amazon tribes use blowguns with poison darts that can kill a monkey at 50 meters. But here's the incredible part. They've developed different poisons for different prey. Some are designed to kill quickly, others to paralyze, some work on mammals, others on birds. They've essentially created a complete pharmaceutical arsenal. Using only forest plants, the Moken have developed spears that work effectively underwater, where the physics of movement are completely different. They understand how light refracts underwater, how water resistance affects their throw, and how to compensate for all these factors. The Yakel use traps that are works of engineering art. They can catch birds and small animals with minimal effort using mechanical advantage and animal behavior knowledge that would impress any engineer. Food preservation is crucial for survival, and these tribes have mastered techniques that don't require refrigeration. They smoke meat, dry fruits, and ferment vegetables to create foods that can last for months. But they've gone beyond just preserving food. They've learned to enhance nutrition through fermentation, to create foods that are easier to digest, and to develop flavors that make simple ingredients incredibly satisfying. Plant medicine is perhaps the most sophisticated knowledge these tribes possess. They've identified plants that can treat everything from headaches to broken bones. They understand drug interactions, dosages, and preparation methods that rival modern pharmacology. What's remarkable is their systematic approach to plant medicine. They don't just randomly try plants. They've developed testing procedures, they understand which parts of plants are active, and they know how to prepare medicines for maximum effectiveness and safety. Shelter construction shows remarkable engineering knowledge regardless of the environment. Whether building in trees, on water, or on land, these tribes create structures that can withstand extreme weather conditions. They understand load distribution, material properties, and environmental factors that affect construction. They've developed techniques for making buildings that are both strong and flexible, that can survive earthquakes, storms, and floods. Most importantly, all these tribes have developed sustainable resource management systems. They understand that their survival depends on maintaining the health of their environment. They practice conservation, crop rotation, and population control to ensure their resources remain available for future generations. This isn't just practical knowledge, it's a completely different way of thinking about the relationship between humans and nature. These tribes see themselves as part of their environment, not separate from it. Their survival depends on the health of their ecosystem, so they've developed practices that maintain that health. Now we come to the most difficult question of all. What should we do about these isolated tribes? The question has become one of the most complex ethical dilemmas in modern anthropology, and I want to explore it honestly with you. Scientists and governments are struggling to balance respect for indigenous rights with the need to protect these vulnerable populations. It's a dilemma that has no easy answers, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The primary concern is disease, and this is absolutely terrifying when you understand the science. These tribes have no immunity to common illnesses that most of us barely notice. A simple cold could kill an entire village. The flu could wipe out a culture that has survived for thousands of years. The history of contact between isolated tribes and modern civilization is filled with tragic examples of populations being wiped out by disease within months of first contact. When European explorers reached the Americas, diseases killed an estimated 90% of the indigenous population. We're talking about entire civilizations being destroyed by germs. But isolation also creates vulnerabilities that are becoming impossible to ignore. Climate change is altering the environments these tribes depend on. Deforestation and pollution are destroying their traditional territories. Illegal activities like logging and mining threaten their safety directly. Some argue that limited contact might be necessary to protect them from these external threats. How do you protect a tribe from illegal loggers if you can't communicate with them? How do you warn them about environmental dangers if you can't make contact? The Brazilian government has developed a policy called protective isolation. They monitor tribes from a distance using satellite imagery and occasional flyovers to ensure they are not being threatened, but they don't initiate contact unless there's immediate danger. This approach has been relatively successful, but it requires significant resources and political commitment. They maintain buffer zones around tribal territories, they prosecute illegal activities in these areas, and they have rapid response teams ready to intervene if tribes are threatened. But other countries with isolated tribes don't have the same level of protection. The Sentinelese are protected by Indian law, but enforcement can be difficult when you're dealing with an island in the middle of the ocean. The Korowai are under pressure from Indonesian development projects that see their forest as valuable timber. The ethical debate extends beyond just contact policies, and this is where it gets really complicated. Do we have the right to study these tribes without their consent? Is it ethical to use satellite imagery to monitor their movements? Should we share their traditional knowledge with the scientific community, even if it could lead to commercial exploitation? Some anthropologists argue that we have a responsibility to document these cultures before they disappear. They point out that these tribes represent thousands of years of human knowledge and experience that will be lost forever if we don't study them. Others believe that any form of study without consent is a form of cultural colonialism. They argue that we have no right to treat these tribes as subjects of scientific research, that their knowledge belongs to them, not to us. The tribes themselves can't participate in this debate because we can't communicate with them without potentially destroying them. It's a catch-22 that highlights the fundamental problem. With any approach to isolated tribes, the future of these tribes is uncertain, and the challenges they face are accelerating. Climate change is happening faster than they can adapt. Globalization is bringing outside pressures that their traditional isolation strategies can't address. Some form of contact might become unavoidable, but there's also reason for hope. These tribes have survived for thousands of years by adapting to changing circumstances. They've developed remarkable resilience and flexibility. Some are finding ways to maintain their traditional lifestyles while selectively adopting modern tools and knowledge. The key might be finding ways to protect them that don't require direct contact. Better enforcement of territorial boundaries, stricter penalties for illegal activities in their areas, and international cooperation to address global threats like climate change. We need to develop new technologies and approaches that allow us to protect these tribes while respecting their autonomy. Satellite monitoring, remote sensing, and other technologies might allow us to ensure their safety without making direct contact. But we also need to be honest about the limitations of any approach. These tribes exist in a world that's changing rapidly. Climate change, deforestation, and globalization are forces that affect them whether they want contact or not. The question isn't whether these tribes will face changes. The question is whether we can find ways to help them adapt to those changes while preserving their essential identity and autonomy. So here we are at the end of our journey through some of the most isolated and fascinating cultures on our planet. These tribes represent something precious and irreplaceable. They're living links to our human past, masters of survival skills we've forgotten, and guardians of knowledge that might be crucial for our future. But they also represent something more. They show us that there are many different ways to be human, that the path we've chosen with our technology and our cities and our global economy isn't the only way that humans can create rich, complex, sustainable cultures using completely different approaches. The Sentinelese have maintained their isolation for 60,000 years. Think about that. They've survived ice ages, climate changes, natural disasters, and countless attempts at contact. They represent an unbroken chain of human knowledge stretching back to the dawn of our species. The Korowai have created a civilization in the trees that's perfectly adapted to their environment. They've solved engineering problems that would challenge modern architects. They've developed sustainable practices that allow them to live in harmony with one of the world's most complex ecosystems. The Amazon tribes have turned the world's largest rainforest into their pharmacy, their grocery store, and their home. They possess knowledge about plant medicine that could revolutionize modern healthcare. They understand ecological relationships that we're only beginning to discover. The Moken have adapted to life on the ocean in ways that seem superhuman. They've developed physical and mental capabilities that allow them to thrive in an environment that would kill most of us. They've created sustainable fishing practices that have maintained marine ecosystems for generations. The Yakel have found ways to maintain their traditional culture while adapting to contact with the modern world. They've created belief systems that help them make sense of change while preserving their essential identity. The question we face is profound, and I want you to really think about this. Should we leave them alone, respecting their choice to remain isolated, even if it means losing access to their knowledge forever? Or should we find ways to connect with them, risking their destruction but potentially learning things that could benefit all of humanity? There's no easy answer, and anyone who tells you there is probably hasn't thought deeply enough about the complexity of the situation. But one thing is clear: these tribes deserve our respect and protection. They've survived for thousands of years without our help, and they've developed ways of life that are sustainable and sophisticated. They're not primitive or backward. They're simply different. They've made different choices about how to live, and those choices have created cultures that are rich, complex, and valuable. As you go about your day, surrounded by modern technology and convenience, remember that there are people on this planet who have chosen a completely different path. They've found ways to live that don't require destroying their environment or depleting their resources. They've maintained cultures that value cooperation over competition, sustainability over growth, and wisdom over information. Maybe they have something to teach us after all. Maybe in our rush to embrace technology and globalization, we've lost sight of some fundamental truths about what it means to be human. What do you think? Should we try to make contact with these isolated tribes, or should we leave them alone? How do we balance our curiosity with their right to remain isolated? How do we protect them from the threats they face while respecting their autonomy? These aren't just academic questions. The decisions we make about these tribes will determine whether these incredible cultures survive or disappear forever. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious about your perspective on this complex issue. And if you found this exploration of human diversity and survival fascinating, there's so much more to discover. Subscribe for more content about the incredible ways humans have adapted to life on our planet. The diversity of human cultures is one of our species' greatest achievements, and these isolated tribes represent some of the most remarkable examples of human adaptability and resilience. Before you go, I want to leave you with one final thought. These tribes have survived everything nature and history have thrown at them. They've adapted to ice ages, climate changes, natural disasters, and the pressure of an increasingly connected world. They represent the incredible resilience of the human spirit and our ability to find ways to thrive in any environment. But they also represent something fragile. Each of these cultures is unique and irreplaceable. Once lost, they can never be recovered. The knowledge they possess, the skills they've developed, and the wisdom they've accumulated over thousands of years could disappear in a single generation. The choice of what happens next isn't just up to governments and scientists, it's up to all of us. How we think about these tribes, how we talk about them, and how we support efforts to protect them will determine their future. So take a moment to appreciate what you've learned today. These aren't just interesting stories about exotic people. These are our fellow humans, members of our species who have chosen different paths and developed different solutions to the challenges of existence. They remind us that human potential is vast and varied, that there are many ways to be human, and that the world is richer and more diverse than we often imagine. In a time when globalization seems to be making everything the same, these tribes stand as proof that diversity isn't just possible, it's essential. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of the last primitive tribes science can't reach. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep wondering about the incredible diversity of human experience on our amazing planet.